Well, it may be the off week, but we don't want to leave you hanging. Why? Because you're obsessed. I'm obsessed with the raddest sport in the world. This week we're doing something a little bit different while we wait for the gate to drop in Birmingham. If you liked our Seth Hammaker bio last week, you'll love this week's show. It's a playback from last year where we put Ken Roczen, McAdoo, Levi Kitchen, Hampshire, and Ty Masterpool, the best episode ever, by the way, under the microscope and give you a better understanding of who they are and why they are. We've also put all Main Event Moto podcasts from last week and this week in front of the paywall at patreon.com/maineventmoto to fill your days with content during the off week and make sure you get a little something to scratch that itch. So check the link in the bio. Thank you for tuning in. Enjoy the show, and we'll see you next week after Bama. Producer Joe, drop the gate. So many storylines heading into Arlington, but there can only be one lead story, and it's Ken Roczen. Atta baby Kenneth, let's go! What a rad win with a massive whip to top it off from a guy that was obviously gonna get one of these, right? It looked like everything was there. Speed, the bike, mental side was on, just needed the right setting to piece it all together, and Glendale was it. He gelled perfectly with the track, smashed the heat race and the main, and now becomes the 5th winner in 6 races to start the season. Like AP's win in San Diego, when Kenny wins, everyone's happy. The crowd loses it, and his competitors are quick to ride over for a knuckle bump. Why is that? How did we get here with Kenny? It's actually one of the most ridiculous stories in the sport, with way more goalies than heights, which explains the fans' affection. Here's the Ken Roczen story, as tight as I can tell it. Kenny was the Jet, a young diet generational talent who did things way earlier than the rest. A world champ at 16, then an overnight sensation in the US pretty much from the moment he got here. Won the 450 Motocross Championship as a 20-year-old rookie, crushed it for a few years, switched to Honda, then won the first 2 rounds of the 2017 Supercross season. I remember thinking, uh-oh, just like I am with Jet. I actually called him the Whitney Houston of Supercross on my podcast, which was weird, but I had an analogy that made sense at the time, whatever. Then the Anaheim crash, the arm, the surgeries. It changed everything, honestly, and sometimes I wonder what the sport looks like if Ken doesn't get hurt that night. Does Dungey win that title? If so, how does it go down? Does Eli still break through that season and win 9 races? What does that 3-way title fight look like? What do Eli, Jason, and Coop's titles look like with a different Ken Roczen on the gate? Supercross history changed that night, but as doom and gloom as it was, lucky for us, he wasn't done. After being told he wouldn't be able to write his name with a pen, he actually came back and raced, then destroyed the other arm in Cooper Webb's back wheel. That was terrible. Still gives me nausea, but again, he came back, chipped away, then grabbed a huge emotional win at the 2020 St. Louis Supercross, completing one of the raddest comeback stories of all time. Wouldn't be able to write his name with a pen to winning a 450 main event? But then Kenny got kind of weird. The mystery sickness, unexplainable hot and cold swings, clickering his bike into madness, a bunch of little things that he wouldn't let us ignore. Goofy social media posts and comments, confusing interviews, a guy who seemed lost. I remember a press day conversation I had with him. No cameras or mics, just 2 dudes sitting on a tough block chatting, and he was not good. He was open and honest with me that day, and I became a forever fan. But he wasn't happy, but for some reason kept showing up. Then finally, he did what some people do when they've had enough. They walk. And that's what he did, but from Honda. Think about that. Factory Honda. He went on Bubba's World, then toured the world, rode every bike except the Cannondale, and decided to race for a factory-ish team that had a bike with a Kickstarter. Silly move from the outside looking in. Great move from the inside looking out. A welcoming family atmosphere, no factory pressure, bike freedom, and Larry frickin' Brooks on your side. A perfect situation, and it's brought us Kenny 3.0. The crowd cheers, and the riders respect him because they know what he went through, and they know how brutal this sport truly is. The fans dig a guy who can reinvent himself and bounce back from the depths, and Kenny has multiple times. Pretty simple. That's why the building rocks when he wins. So congrats, Ken Roczen, for proving yourself again. But now, go win the championship so I can finish riding your 30 for 30. If you like overreaction, and if you like the Daniel Blair Show, then you are going to love Main Event Moto. Come hang with us over at patreon.com/Main Event Moto. We see the comments. We know you want more. We know you want longer. Well, that's what we do at Main Event Moto. We have long form podcasts where we break everything down layer by layer, and we have a really, really good time. Sometimes too much fun, and that's the point. So come join us over at patreon.com/Main Event Moto. Let's party. Congratulations, Cameron McAdoo, Triple Crown winner, points leader, and the most grateful interviewee of all time. What a rad story. From the flip at Atlanta to the ballsy ride at Detroit, Cameron has made it so easy to root for him, and his grace on the podium is understood, especially when you know his story. If you scratch below the surface, the real McAdoo story is not where he is today. It's how he got there. If you followed amateur racing in past years or just heard stories through the grapevine, you'd hear the names Mike Alessi, Adam Cincerello, and Jet Reynolds as the most dominating mini bike racers in history. You won't hear the name Cameron McAdoo, because as he puts it, as a kid, he was a squid, and the result sheet backs that up. Let's take a look at the Racer X Loretta Lynn's vault for context. No 50 results on the scorecard. The dude was getting smoked by his sister in those days, and Loretta's and a pro career weren't on radar. He finally shows up on 65s, where he finished an impressive 12th to riders like Chase Bell, Cade Walker, Tommy Maxey, and Tyler Kirshner. Who dat? Never cracked the top 20 on an 85, never cracked the top 20 on a 125, nope. Fast forward to big bikes, and the dude shows up in the pro classes and finished 11th and 12th to guys like RJ Hampshire, Holt Nichols, and Aaron Plessinger. The Sioux City, Iowa native was going nowhere. Just a fast local kid who would most likely turn pro, race a year or two, quit and get a job, then drive around with his pro card hanging from his rearview mirror, trying to pull chicks at the local mall. But a year later, he started messing with the top dogs, finishing top 5 in both A classes with Chase Sexton and Michael Mosman on the gate. He caught the eye of Tony Alessi, who brought him in, gave him support, and offered him a chance due to the heart he was showing every second he was on the track. Then came a real opportunity, a fill-in ride with Geico Honda. A few decent results, but eventually, after a podium at the East-West Showdown in Vegas, he was dropped. I know that feeling. Not the podium, but walking to the Samboyd pits with your tail between your legs and nothing more than a jersey as memorabilia. But that wasn't his end, only mine. The only offer that came his way was a Pulpamex deal for straight rhythm, which was followed by the creation of the Whacker's identity, the tendency to send and crash himself into oblivion. Again, the dude was going nowhere, but he still had that heart. Eventually got another fill-in ride with TLD that led to an actual real ride with Pro Circuit Kawasaki, where he's been ever since. For the past few years, he's gotten faster, smarter, more disciplined, thanks to Nick Way, and even though the loose, Sendy character still exists, it's tightened up just enough to deliver him the red plate and points lead in the 2024 250 East Coast Supercross Championship. That is a story. How does a story like this happen? How does a nobody amateur crash test dummy get to where he is right now? Heart, more than anyone on the gate. Cameron has never let up. He's a role model for stubborn resilience, and that's what ultimately gets it done in this sport. The lesson here? Never give up on yourself. Never let up if you truly believe. And most importantly, surround yourself with people who lift you up when you're down, not kick you down when you're up. And the second lesson? Don't let amateur results dictate your faith. You could be smoked by your sister, watch everyone else crush Loretta's while you're not even being recognized by name. You could be given tryouts and fill-ins and fail multiple times. You can crash yourself into highlight reels, get dropped, get forgotten about, and still fight your way back to the top. Triple Crown winner, points leader, inspiration. And you wonder why he's so gracious.
The Daniel Blair Show, sponsored by Motosport.com, Mika Metals, Race Tech, ASV Inventions, and Guts Racing.
Levi Kitchen is on full breakout mode, and wow, could you see this one coming. He's won 2 of the last 3 rounds, can't miss on his starts, and is breaking free of the pack in pure speed. At the age of 23, but with only 17 Supercross races to his name. Whoa, that's some funky math. For context, Jet raced his first Supercross at 16, Deegan, Juju, Dax Bennick, Chance Hymas, all at 17. Levi Kitchen? 21. What? Why does Levi come across like a vet, even though he's done less than 2 years worth of 250 Supercross racing? Because there's an alternate path to making it, folks, and it's been done before. Justin Cooper. Back to the Racer X Loretta Vault for a second week. Levi Kitchen, you will see, has a very unique amateur timeline, and some of you amateur parents should take notice. Levi poked around with the front group on mini bikes, grabbing some top 10s in a class that had Garrett Marchbanks, Carson Mumford, Jalik Swoll, and Styles Robertson in it. He'd sneak in a good moto from time to time, but was never a real threat in the class. So at 16, which is way later than most, he moves up to the 125s and finishes second at Loretta Lynn's to Ty Masterpool. And it looks like we may have something here. But for a reason I don't know and would love to know someday, Levi stayed back another year on a 125 as a 17-year-old instead of joining his classmates on 250s. Childhood rivals were excelling. Styles Robertson was winning the B class. Carson Mumford and Jalik Swoll were racing the A class already and winning it, while Garrett Marchbanks was already pro and on his way to winning the Daytona Supercross a year later. No, Levi stayed back on 125s for some reason and had worse results. How do you think that felt? Watching kids you've raced your whole life move up, get rides, be pros under the lights, and you aren't? Tough pill to swallow, but it was the best thing that could have ever happened to him. The truth is, he wasn't ready. He didn't have the program, the body, the maturity, or the confidence to move up with his class. He would have been swallowed up, driving around a few years later with his pro card hanging from his rearview mirror, looking for chicks at the local mall. It happens. I bet it stung at the time, but truth is, every kid's timeline is different. The 16, 17-year-old path does exist and has a history of producing stars and duds. But for riders like Levi Kitchen or Justin Cooper, who weren't ready to break out as an early teen, they needed a little more time to grow physically, mentally, and emotionally, and it worked. Levi moved up to the 250s when he was ready and started winning and really never stopped. He shows up in the B Limited class at Loretta's at 19 years old, way older than the other kids on the gate, not in the mod class against future teammates Matt LeBlanc, Nate Thrasher, and Nick Romano. A dodging the comp move, some might say. A smart move. Ride the stock class, equal bikes, chance to dominate and go 6 for 6, which he did. Put down insane lap times in front of the whole star team, moto after moto, and give everyone a glimpse of what could become if he was only given the bike and program. Ta-da! Nice bait. Taken. Brilliant move, but heavy gamble. If he loses that week at Loretta's, he's a sandbagger, not worth a second look. But he went 6 for 6. A month after Loretta's, I watched him race his first pro race at the Top Gun team shootout at Washougal. Knuckle bumped him, watched every moto that weekend, and knew then and there that this kid was different and he was special. He waxes everyone in the A class at Minios, gets a Star Yamaha ride, races his first Supercross at 21, wins a couple outdoor motos and a Triple Crown, leaves the danger zone for PC, wins A2, dominates Seattle, and here we are. Rad story. No knock on Marchbanks and Mumford, who were both top 5 in Seattle and are writing their own stories right now. But it's the top 10 kid in the class who laid back, played the calendar to his timeline, and has now taken control of the 250 West Coast Supercross Championship all these years later. The lesson? Play chess, not checkers. Every kid is different. Have fun, be competitive, but don't drain the tank. At 15 years old, the career starts, and now every decision you make will have an effect on the outcome. Every decision. Know your rider, know your kid, and give him a real chance to make it by following his development, not the superstar calendar. Levi wasn't ready at 16 or 17 or 18. He got there late, and nobody cared how old he was when he popped. They cared that he popped, and when he did, they were on him. Play the board. Checkmate.
Main Event Moto's Overreaction is sponsored by Motosport.com, Mika Metals, Race Tech, ASV Inventions, and Guts Racing. If you support Overreaction, support our sponsors.
So many storylines heading into Denver, but there can only be one lead story, and it's RJ Hampshire. That's right, we have our very own Rick James in Supercross, and Rick is 2 main events away from being a 250 Supercross champ. Using a combination of heart, a locked wrist, and newfound discipline, RJ has changed his traits, his tendencies, and somewhat his image as a longtime sender into a polished and predictable podium machine. That has led him to this moment. With the departure of the Lawrence brothers from 250 Racing, the Australian Honda domination came to an end, and a door was left wide open. Levi Kitchen stepped up, as did Tom Vial and Hayden Deegan, all looking to be that guy and take over the class in 2024. While these dudes stepped up, RJ was already there, and now looking back, should have been the favorite to win either coast, once you scratch below the surface a bit. Now, after a huge win at the Nashville East-West Showdown, by far the biggest of his career, RJ has his battered championship contender Levi Kitchen on the ropes, and 2 gate drops from now, the odds of becoming the 250 West Coast Supercross champion are in his favor. Back in episode 13, we took a dive into Levi Kitchen's background to give you a better idea of who this guy was. Hole-shotting, winning races, becoming a star. That story made him more understandable. And when you look into the details of RJ Hampshire's career, it makes his mentality way more understandable. First, RJ's story is not much different from Kitchen's or Cameron McAdoo's when it comes to amateur success. Other than a second-place finish to Cooper Webb at Loretta Lynn's as a 6-year-old on a 50, RJ had nothing on his resume in those younger years. He would race 65s and 85s like the rest of the kids, but never sniffed the top 5 again until he was on a 250 in the B class. Quick story and a humble brag. Summer of 2012, I coached a NorCal kid named Troy Graffender. We built a 2-month plan, the kid followed it to a T, and worked his ass off. Showed up at Loretta's and won it, beating guys like Aaron Plessinger, Jordan Smith, and RJ Hampshire, who finished 4th, his first solid showing at the ranch in 10 years. This was a turning point. RJ got a taste, and with that taste came the biggest decision of his career. One of the biggest of his life, actually, and it's playing out in front of your eyes right now. You see, RJ grew up a baseball player, a pitcher, and he was really good. Good enough to chase that dream with a realistic shot at making it. Division I interest, maybe a career in MLB, who knows where it goes? We never will, because RJ decided to give it up and be a full-time dirt bike racer. He loved it more. And with that decision came a commitment to becoming a pro, maybe a factory rider, and if things work out and fall into place, a champion? Well, he moved up to the A class, put his head down, had a solid Loretta's in 2013, then traveled from Florida to Las Vegas to race the 250 All-Star class at the Monster Cup with the hopes of breaking out and getting a ride. Well, he won it, giving the fans of Supercross their first glimpse of RJ Hampshire. He got the ride with Geico Honda, and with confidence and support, it all came together. He won both A classes at Loretta's in the summer of 2014, showed up at an arena cross in Reno later that year and won that too, whooping my ass in the process. He was sketchy though, oh my God. Absolutely weeded himself multiple times that weekend, but took the beating and won. Anyone who saw him in Reno knows exactly what I'm talking about. Holy sin. Then somehow, the wild kid I raced in the Livestock Center would go on to finish 5th in his rookie season of Supercross, behind Marvin Muscan, defending champ Justin Bogle, Jeremy Martin, and Joey Savacci. An incredible start to a pro career. And then, lots of crashing, injuries, some success, but was definitely not showing the traits needed to be a champion. Some would call it wild and reckless, others call it heart, but RJ could not find the balance and spent years either on the box or on the ground. And nobody in their right mind would have predicted that RJ would become the most consistent dude in the class, which he is now, backed by some pretty incredible stats. Did you know that RJ has finished 2nd in points to Jet Lawrence the past 2 seasons? Yeah, yank freak show off the entry list, and RJ's already won this thing a couple times. Did you know that last year he was only off the podium twice? Yeah, 7 of 9 on the box. And this season, 3 wins, a 2-point lead with 2 to go. So what are the odds here? RJ won Denver last year, which always feels good when you roll back into a building that's given you something special. He won the first showdown this year, so Salt Lake City plays in his favor as well. His combatant, Levi Kitchen, he's been incredible this year, but he's banged up. I'm hearing he's doing better, but a rib issue in the Denver and Salt Lake elevation will be brutal for the guy. This sets up perfect for Rick James. A decade of crafting that balance, of being an all-in pinner but learning to keep it inside the blocks, a stubborn, relentless approach to racing. And here we are, 2 nights away from being able to look back and say, hey, I made the right call. And that 90-mile-an-hour fastball was never going to give me the same feeling that winning a Supercross main event does. Imagine how that championship would feel.
Main event, motomerch.com. Main event, motomerch.com. Main event, motomerch.com. Main event, motomerch.com.
So many storylines heading into Southwick, but there can only be one lead story, and it's Ty Masterpool. If I was to tell you that a 450 privateer got the call to fill in on a factory 250 race team with a legendary history, that would be a cool story. What if the fill-in rider didn't look like a fill-in rider and found himself inside the top 10, knocking on the door of a top 5 or a podium? That would be even cooler. What if that privateer hopped on that factory 250 and won the High Point National, giving that legendary team their 300th race win? That alone is an incredible story. But this story is way deeper and way gnarlier than that. And in my opinion, when you look at some of the biggest stories in sports history, not just moto, there's not many that match up to the Ty Masterpool story that started 14 years ago. I'll begin with this. We all love motocross for many different reasons. The sport is a violent symphony, it's poetry in motion and downright brutal. And we love it because of the adrenaline dump that comes from the risk and the danger of doing it. That feeling you get when you learn to ride, when you do a big jump for the first time, race your first Supercross, or when you're on the fence at a pro national and the gate drops and 40 dudes fly into the first corner. That feeling, that rush, is risk. But with that risk comes real consequences. Femurs, ACLs, collarbones, and shoulders, the body takes a beating, but sometimes it can be worse than broken bones. The sport can also be fatal. Fast forward to 2010. Imagine you're 8 years old and you lose your big brother. Not from sickness, not from a car accident, not from a dramatic event outside the sport you love. Instead, it happened doing the sport you love. Doing the sport that you and your family love. How would it feel after to ride a motorcycle again or even sit on one? How would it feel for the parents knowing you have 2 younger boys who eventually would want to continue doing this? Well, that 8-year-old boy was Ty Masterpool. Jesse Masterpool was an amateur phenom, a star, one of the best in his young generation that included Adam Cincerulo, Aaron Plessinger, Justin Hill, and Cooper Webb, who all became 250 champs and then some. Jesse was one of them. He passed away after a crash at the Lake Whitney Amateur National at 14 years old, and it was a shock to the industry, especially the amateur pits. We've had riders, young and old, have fatal accidents in this sport, but not a kid at the highest level during a race at the highest level. And again, it was devastating to everyone. This is where the Ty Masterpool story begins. 3 years later, Ty shows up to Loretta's and wins the 65 7-11 class against Joe Shimoda and Nate Thrasher. Right there, you could end the story, and it's a movie. Kid loses his brother, then wins the biggest race on the planet 3 years later. Yo, Disney, Warner Brothers, where you at? A few years later, Ty wins the 85cc class, then backs it up by winning both Super Mini titles at the ranch on a TM 112. Google the TM 85. Yeah, he won the most prestigious mini bike title at the most prestigious mini bike race on a bike most have never heard of. The comp wasn't too shabby either. Styles Robertson, Carson Mumford, and Levi Kitchen were on the gate, and it was clear as day that this kid would be special and, of course, would get a coveted factory 250 ride. Ty signed with Star Yamaha and finished 11th overall as a rookie in the 2019 Pro Motocross Championship. Not bad. But after that rookie summer, things didn't go so smoothly. There were no Supercross results on the resume in 2019 or 2020. Finally gave it a go in 2021 and finished 19th. That ain't gonna cut it. Not on that team, and eventually he was done there. It looked like one of those sorts of deals. Good amateur, not a good pro, a bust. And maybe the Ty Masterpool story should have just ended at Loretta's on the Super Mini. But no, he kept going, and in 2022 and 2023, I have to imagine life was a blur. He rode for the AEO KTM team, then was on his own, then was on BarX Suzuki. And I remember at this time saying publicly, why doesn't he go race the GPs? Race somewhere where they don't do Supercross, bro, and you could get back to being you, locking that wrist and shredding. Why didn't it happen? I don't know. Did they want to go, but nobody gave him a chance? Did someone over there want him, but he wasn't interested? I don't know, and maybe I'm overreacting here, but Ty could have been the next Zach Osborne, who went overseas and made a career for himself, then came back and maybe become a multi-time 250 and 450 champion. But it didn't happen. Next up for Ty is the summer of 2023, where the story takes a big turn. Sometime between Paula and Hangtown, a decision was made that has turned out to be the best move he's made career-wise by far. That week, in between rounds, the Masterpool switched to the 450 class. A great move for a privateer, no longer chasing around factory engines that you cannot compete with outdoors, and now the pressure was on him as a rider to break through and reintroduce himself to the sport on a bike that's a little more even. The dude got 6th at Hangtown that Saturday, then spent the rest of the summer on our TV screens, grabbing top 10 after top 10 after top 10. And everyone went, dang, he's this year's Privateer 450 summer guy that we get every year who shreds, but is just a Privateer 450 summer guy. Great summer. 7th in points. Then comes another smart decision in 2024. Don't take the bait and drop down to the 250 Supercross class and try to make something out of nothing. Stay on that 450 and just get in there and learn. Battle with Kyle Chisholm, Kevin Morans, and Cade Clayson and that group, which he did. He made 4 450 mains this year, never finished inside the top 15, but laid the foundation for a future that is coming his way eventually, a return to 250 Supercross. So we get to the 2024 Pro Motocross Championship, his specialty, on that 450, ready for another summer of good starts and top 10 battles with the factory boys. But Pro Circuit Kawasaki had quite the week. First, it's announced that Austin Faulkner will be missing the outdoors. Dang it. Then Cameron McAdoo and Seth Hammaker go out on the same day, the week of round 1. Are you serious? Poor Mitch is going to Paula with just Levi Kitchen, which for obvious reasons wouldn't satisfy sponsors and partners. Gotta get someone, but who? How about that amateur phenom that races a Kawasaki as a privateer in the 450 class? He was pretty dang good last year if I remember correctly. Yeah, that might work. Give him a call. Ty gets on the bike the day before the race, emotional, excited, anxious, all wrapped into one. Then started 19th in Moto 1, crashed halfway through, and fought back to 24th. Ouch. And uh-oh. Was this the right guy? I mean, he's fast, but everyone is. Is he worthy of that spot on PC? Then he throws together a solid 5 moto run with scores of 10, 6, 11, 8, 10. Solid for a fill-in, but not special. But underneath the surface, you could see things were coming around a bit. And with a good start at High Point, top 5, maybe a podium, but a moto win. But not an overall, not against the Deegs. This is where the script writers really pour it on. Ty leads Moto 1 at High Point, battles to the checkered flag with the points leader, but comes up 2.6 seconds short. Man, still a great ride, but a win would have been unreal. Moto 2, he gets back to the front, falls while leading, gets the lead back, loses it again to the summer breakout star Chance Hymas, grabs it back and takes off running. A Moto win and a 2-1 overall in sight. But here comes danger. Shoulder spikes out, danger zone engaged, savage animal dropping 2 10s, and he's coming. The dramatic music starts playing. Everything in slow motion. The last 30 seconds of that moto had to be insane inside that mind of his. 14 years later, after losing your big bro doing the sport that you both love, overcome that heartbreak to become an amateur stud and champ, get a factory ride, turn pro, and flop. Battle through some weird years, get forgotten about, turn 450 privateer guy, and force your name back into relevance. Get a ride with the legendary PC team, string together a couple weekends of meh, but here we go. 30 seconds to close this down. And he does it. Tell me a better story than that. You know, a good movie draws you in with the action but steals your heart with the story. Rocky, Rudy, Remember the Titans, all incredible sports stories told to perfection, line by line, scene by scene, executed in a way to capture your attention and never let it go. The Ty Masterpool story smokes those, and it just happened right here in our little sport of motocross. I know sometimes I say silly things and can over-dramatize a situation. I can't help it. I'm passionate. But if this story doesn't turn into a feature-length film, I'm going to flip a table. What do you say, Producer Joe? Should we start writing? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.